Welcome to a Skewed Chimp.
Some of you might remember the failure pile video from a couple of weeks ago. If so, you probably also recognize the item on the left, which is a walnut cylinder that I got along with my lathe. I had already worked with it a little bit, and by worked with it I mean messed it up. I had done things to it when I was playing around with it that ended up with me having to make it round 2 or 3 different times and taking a couple of inches at least off of the length of the cylinder overall. It made it into the failure pile when I became frustrated because I wasn't able to make what I wanted out of this item. I'm going to try to work on it again in this video for you all, and hopefully come away with a shot glass, but we'll see. First, I need to adjust the lathe speed. I start by opening the headstock guard by opening the screw knob. Then I loosen the T-bar and slide it toward the front of the machine to move the pulleys closer, which creates slack in the belt. Then I need to move the belt to the desired position on the lathe. The position is determined by looking on this chart. I'll try to post up a copy of this chart as part of the video. Now this chart does not exactly match the speeds displayed on the front of my lathe, and I'm not sure why. It's pretty close though. This chart has the RPM for the US and Canada on the left. These RPM speeds on the right are for Australia, the UK, and New Zealand. I'm not really sure why. I'm not that kind of scientist. It might be a result of alternating current versus direct current, but I really neither know nor care. In this case, I'm using a blank that's smaller than 2 inches wide. According to the chart, I should rough it out at around 1450 RPM. Happily, it's already roughed. The chart also shows that I should do my detail work at somewhere between 2900 and 3630 RPM. For whatever reason, I chose to set it up at 2900 because I thought that would be better for me. With the adjustments done, I needed to make sure the pulleys were secured. I put tension down on the T-bar, suppressed the belt about 1/4 of an inch, and next I locked the T-bar in place. Finally, I resecured the headstock guard using the screw knob, and I'm all set. For reference, later in the project I dropped my lathe speed down to 1030 RPM just because it seemed better for me. I also sanded it at this RPM. If you guys have any comments or insights about that, let me know. I'd actually really like to hear from other turners to see what speeds they use for different things, including sanding or for detail work. With everything set, I went ahead and started to get it turned to round, which wasn't that big a deal since it was mostly cylindrical to begin with. But I still take forever to do everything. So like I said in the last video, one day maybe I'll show you a complete project from beginning to end without anything cut out and at normal speed, but that's not happening today. Once I had it essentially round, I went ahead and I started working on the opening for the shot glass, the open part, whatever that's called. I used the bowl gouge for it, and happily I didn't get very many significant catches in this project like I had in the other projects, and I think part of that might be because the wood didn't have any cracks or anything in it, and also it's a much more dense wood. I also think I'm the beneficiary of at least a little bit of experience already. Nonetheless, this was incredibly slow going, and it took me forever. I honestly was pretty happy with what I was able to do with the bowl gouge on the open end of the shot glass though, and I really liked the way that cut and the way that it worked. The problem that I quickly discovered is that the opening of the shot glass is not very wide, and the bowl gouge is. So as soon as you start to get even partway into the project, the bowl gouge no longer fits, and you can't really see what's going on inside of it. So that was not helpful. I actually wish that I was a little bit faster so that I could show you everything that I did, because I made some nice cuts, or at least what I thought were nice cuts, and here's one example. I won't bore you with all of them, but I wanted to show you this one. And then, of course, as is always the case, especially when you're new and don't really know what you're doing, I had some interesting events arise. I didn't realize it, and I had never felt anything, but I, at some point, must have put the bowl gouge onto my arm to study it while I was picking some stuff up. At least that's what I seem to remember. And it's so sharp that it cut me and I never even felt it, which is pretty impressive because I'm not good at this. Well, I'm not experienced at this, but apparently I got this one pretty sharp. Once I got it all cleaned up, it was not as bad as the bleeding had made it look. It just caught me by surprise when I looked down at my arm and had been covered in blood. But yeah, it's not that big of a tear. Still, I'm real impressed that I never even felt anything. That means that bull gouge was sharpened correctly, in my humble opinion. As in previous videos, a lot of tape was left on the editing floor here, but eventually I made enough progress that I got to this point in the project. It's at this point in the project, by the way, where the bull gouge would no longer fit into the shot glass and give me any ability to maneuver or see, and so I had to adapt. This is my first real attempt at using the scraper, and honestly it wasn't terrible. It did take me a little while to figure out exactly how to use it and what to do with it. As I've said before, you can watch as many videos as you want, but each project is different, and your head is in a different space when you're working on your own project as opposed to watching a video, so there's really no substitute for learning how to do it by doing it. I struggled with the scraper for a little while, but then I reverted to the most basic of all of the tools, a parting tool, because I wanted to be able to get a straight edge in there, and because that was working most easily for me, so I used it. Truth be told, the parting tool is probably the tool I used most for this project, and it probably did the majority of the work all on its own. The next obstacle to overcome was lighting. This is a shot glass, which means it's tall and skinny, and it's laid horizontally. Unfortunately, my lighting is vertical. It's in the roof. I do have some halogens that I can plug in, but they really suck the power out of my garage, which I'll explain in a different video. And hooking up flashlights while also hooking up the video camera, and also making sure that I can see and that the camera can see the back of the inside of the shot glass so that you guys can see what's going on with the project, became particularly difficult. Taking all of this on while I was also trying to complete a project that I had failed at least twice was pretty daunting. On top of that, and per usual, there are a bunch of little mistakes that I'm not giving a whole lot of details about because they're stupid small and massive in quantity. Here's one idea I played around with a little bit, and it actually almost worked. This light has a magnet on it, and I could actually kind of use it this way for a little bit. Obviously, it didn't last very long, and it's a horrible idea, but that was the best I could think of. Because of a couple of different mistakes I had made with this piece, both in the two previous attempts as well as this one, I was pretty tight on space, so I was doing a lot of pretty constant measuring. I had this jigger that I was measuring to try to make sure that I would have enough room to actually be able to use the shot glass as a shot glass. Now, if it didn't work, that wouldn't be the end of the world, but the objective is to create a shot glass. I just kept at it, and progress was very slow going, but it was being made. I gotta tell you that using a parting tool as a flathead scraper in the back of a shot glass is not very fast work. It's really slow, and it requires you to constantly sharpen your tools because that's not what it's used for. And the scraper itself was a great tool, except it couldn't get into the recesses the way that I needed it to do. So that's why I had to use something that had a sharp 90-degree edge on it, like the parting tool. So it was really tedious. Next, I decided I would take a look at the outside and try to get that kind of rounded off. Everything was going fine with it, and it was actually really relaxing. I was really enjoying it. And then you can tell by the sound of it that it wasn't that severe of a catch. But this is a really small project, and I've already made several mistakes that cost me a lot of the exterior wood that I could have used to help overcome them. I didn't have a lot of room left for mistakes, small or otherwise. Worse, because I was operating from a place of ignorance and insecurity, every time I did anything, I would stop and measure again to make sure I had not gone too deep on the shot glass. While I was at it, I had seen some different people take some of the shavings from a piece that they were working on and use that to polish the outside of their project, so I thought I'd give that a go. I don't know if I didn't have enough shavings, or if I had it set to too high of an RPM, or if the piece was too small, or what, but all I did here was burn my hand. I'm nothing if not tenacious, and eventually it came to the part where I felt I was ready to do the favorite part of all of it for me, really, sanding. And I'll show you a little bit of it, but I won't show you all of it. And the reason that I won't show you all of it is because I ended up going through an entire series of sandpaper from P60 to P1200 at least 5 different times to try to make up for blemishes and mistakes that I put into the project while I was working on it. In addition to sanding down so many times because I made mistakes and because I'm still learning, I also have a tendency to be highly perfectionistic. I don't expect for me to be able to do everything perfectly the first time I do it, but if I can do it well, I like to do it well. I took this picture from one of the videos that I had made where I'm using a square to make sure that the exterior edge of the shot glass is as close to perfectly straight as I can possibly get it. This was one of the several, at least 5 separate sets of complete sanding that I had to do to the bowl because I wanted to make sure that the edges were completely straight. And yeah, I got them pretty straight, in case you wondered. After at least 2 more hours of work, I finally got the interior of the shot glass to the depth that I wanted, and the exterior had been all squared up, and I was pretty satisfied with it. So this is me measuring it to make sure that it holds at least 1 full shot of whatever. The problem is that if you look at this particular piece, you can see that the depth of the shot glass is actually probably about here, whereas the entire foot that's underneath it is not good for anything when I'm done. And so this is essentially wasted space, and it's space that I could use to make sure that I had a little bit of extra room in my shot glass, which of course meant I needed to remount it and continue to dig it deeper because I wanted to utilize the extra space that was available instead of simply waste the wood. As you're probably used to seeing from me at this point, I had made a lot of progress based on my calculation of how deep the shot glass had to be. And then another lesson that I already knew had to be learned again. Okay, so I was horsing around. a little, and I did what dumb people do. While it was turning, I put my roughing gouge up here real quick just to try to get one little piece off. And of course I got a catch. And so you can see what that resulted in. What that resulted in was I went from this volume of wood, you can see that this is higher, to this volume of wood in order to get the catch out that I put into my wood through my own poor decision-making skills. So that cost me valuable wood. As a result, this has had to go a little bit deeper than I thought. And even so, I would have been fine, except I've miscalculated the depth. It's actually sufficiently deep right now for a typical shot glass at this depth. However, this is the size, with plenty of room to spare, of the part that I've already cut off or trimmed down to the side. So I think what I'm going to do, because I was going to make a second shot glass off of this as well, I think what I'm going to do is go deeper on this just to make sure I've got some extra room, because it is a tight fit on the shot glass, so that I make sure that I get it all the way to the line, and that way it'll definitely hold a shot without being inconvenienced, because I've got that room to spare. And then I'll do my best to hollow out whatever this is as a second project, and maybe that will be a shot glass, and maybe it will be a candle holder, or maybe it will be a little cup. I don't know, but it'll be something different. But I'm going to go a little bit deeper on this part and make a better and easier to use shot glass. And so that's what I'm going to work on next. And there's a lesson learned. Don't horse around, and do all of your measurements and think it through carefully. But if I were to do this again, it would be going much better. And yeah, that's pretty much how this was going to go from here on out. as though it had gone any differently up to this point. I don't know how visible this will be on the camera, but the problem with this, especially for a new person like myself, is that there is so little room in here to see. I can barely see anything in there, which means I have to feel my way through just about everything I'm doing and hope it doesn't go wrong. So that's a challenge. I really can't see that. And in order for me to be able to see, I also have to crouch way down because there's not really a whole lot of room here, and I'm working way back here in the back. So to be able to see in here, I have to get about eye level with it, which makes it difficult to hold the tools. How do you do that while you're also trying to look through and not block the light and everything? It's quite challenging, honestly. Could probably take a little bit more off there. In any case, so that means that I have to learn how to feel these tools while I'm learning to use them. So again, I think I said this in a previous video, smaller things are not easier for new people. Do larger objects. I should listen to myself. I had been working on the project a couple of days, and at this point I was pretty tired. It's not that I would have actually done this, although I couldn't completely rule it out. But it's just that the idea went through my mind, because I was wondering how I get in there to sand the back of this shot glass. Okay, so it's time for me to sand this sucker. And I've seen lots of people sand lots of things, but I gotta tell you, because that's just the way the brain of a newbie works, is that I actually thought about doing this with some sandpaper taped on the end. I mean, it fits. This tool fits. But then I remembered that this is a 400 RPM. It's set at 400. Right now, a 400 RPM projectile. So essentially, I would have created my own crossbow and probably impaled myself with it. So here's what I've decided to do instead. I mean, I could use just another stick or something, which would be good, but then I can't quite feel where I'm at, and I can't see anything anyway, and it doesn't have a perfectly round shape if I use just a random stick because I haven't made one. So this is my solution. This is going to be awesome. Whether it was a good idea or not, it worked. There were a couple of more missteps along the way, and I had some lines that I had placed into the interior of the shot glass on accident when I was sanding that I had a hell of a time getting out without going through the side of the shot glass. I also had that same problem on the outside of the shot glass. I also messed up like 5,000 other things. At least that's the way it felt. But I did, eventually, get it shaped to the shape that I wanted, dug out to the depth that I needed, kept it on the lathe, got it sanded correctly, and finally was able to apply some finishing oil. For this project, I'm just using mineral oil. I thought about using beeswax because it looked really pretty on the aspen bowl that I failed on in my last video, but I wasn't sure how well that would do mixing with the different things that I'm going to put in this, and I just know that mineral oil is a good all-around solution to any wood thing that you're trying to keep in good condition. After applying several coats of mineral oil to the project, I measured the depth of the shot glass and marked it out on my lathe so I'd make sure that I didn't go deeper than that. You can see that marked on the tool rest with the blue painter's tape. That's just there to make sure that visually I don't go past that line. Now what I'm doing here is not actually parting it off. I'm just trying to get the spot where I will part it off cleared out so that I can put a bevel on the bottom of it and then use a different tool in order to get in and make sure I get a concave base underneath it so that the shot glass sits flat when I do part it off and I still have room to operate. I was originally going to leave it just as a straight cylinder, but I thought I would like the style of having some sort of a beveled foot on the base, so I wanted to give that a shot. Once I had the space cleared out that I wanted to work with to put the bevel on the foot, I went ahead and started doing that. But you can see that this starts off with a catch, and then there's 2 or 3 others later on, and it just doesn't seem to get much better from there on out. I did eventually get it under control and vaguely shaped the foot of the shot glass, but most of the fine work that I had to do in order to get the bevel on it that I wanted as the base, I did that with sandpaper. I just don't have the skills to do the fine shaping that I want to do with these tools yet. Again, I had to use the parting tool to try to put an angle on the bottom of the foot for the shot glass, and got it kind of set up, and then I used sandpaper to refine it. But by now, my parting tool is probably pretty dull, and as a result, I had introduced a wobble into the project as it sat on the chuck. So the lesson there is probably to use the correct tool for the job. And if you're gonna use the wrong tool, at least make sure it's as sharp as possible so that you don't do what I did here. Nonetheless, I knew I could not take the project off of the chuck and remount it, so I would have to figure out how to overcome the wobble. I had also pretty much already made this project as thin as I was willing to make it, so I really had no choice but to press on. I couldn't go ahead and make it round again. Thankfully, the project was almost done. Or so it seemed. I'm going to try to show you this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, I've got, this is the large skew right here, and this is the small skew right here for my pin kit. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to go in at an angle like this and try to get back here going that direction so that I can make this concave and try to part it out. So I'll be going in back here, just digging through just as much as I can, hopefully without crossing the blue. Hopefully without crossing this line. Brace yourself. There's only one thing left that could possibly go wrong. Holy crap, guys. And it's even concave, just like I'd planned. If I sound surprised, who can blame me? It's not like I haven't made mistakes, and it's not like I don't have more failures on my failure pile than I do successes ever. So I had to go get my flask out of the fridge. I couldn't find it, actually. I couldn't remember where I left it because I took it to a buddy's house like 2 weeks ago. Let's see, hopefully that's on camera. Hopefully you guys can see that. So I think that's about a shot right there. I don't know if that made it onto the camera or not. We'll find out. But as it turns out, you know, we got some salt right here. Salud. Skål!